Hey everyone, so Adobe went in pretty hard on AI at their Max conference this year. This wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I did appreciate the fact that they had sort of a Steve Jobsian and one more thing moment when they dropped Firefly 2 Pixels of Vengeance on all of us. So today we're going to dive into Firefly 2, plus, have a good old-fashioned prompt shootout, but we'll also be taking a look at some other surprise announcements that they made, which I actually think are a pretty big deal and not a lot of people are talking about. But maybe more importantly, we'll talk about what they didn't talk about, but we do know is on the way. Okay, let's dive in. So this new version of Firefly is a pretty massive update. I was fairly critical of Firefly when it first dropped. I really just found it kind of bland and unimaginative. So I am happy to report that Firefly 2 has definitely made some improvements since then. For example, let's generate an old chestnut of the channel, a man in a blue business suit walking down a busy city street. They're not bad. I do feel that the square aspect ratio doesn't do them really any justice here. They are all fairly decent images right out of the box. It is exactly what I asked for, a man in a blue business suit. I don't know necessarily about the busyness of the street, but whatever, I'll take it. It doesn't necessarily have to be wall-to-wall people here. If I'm being super nitpicky, as I often am with Adobe because we have a very long, sordid love-hate history, you can see some aberrations here along the sleeve, and along here, it almost looks like he's got a rim light around him. He definitely has kind of this, he's pasted in sort of look. I did notice that there was some inconsistency in the depth of field up in this corner. That said, Adobe has given us a pretty robust sidebar of tools to fix these sorts of things. You can obviously change the aspect ratio, the content type, the style strength is a pretty interesting one. We're going to take a look at that in just a minute. I do like the fact that you can reference styles from other photographs or pieces of art. We have a number of various effects, actually a lot of effects when you start digging into these various subcategories. The composition, and then finally the photo settings, which I actually think is a really powerful tool in that you can change the depth of field, aperture, and the shutter speed. So that's actually super cool. So let's apply some of these to our man in the blue business suit. Changing the perimeters to widescreen, it still remains a photo. I gave this a cinematic look. With a warm tone at golden hour, I gave it a wide angle composition and then changed the aperture settings so that we would have more background blur. And then for the negative prompts, I put tie and beard. It is a little bit weird that you have to hit enter after each word. I'm very used to, tie, comma, beard, but with Adobe Firefly, apparently it is tie, enter, beard, enter. So let's run it and see what we got. So a bit much. Obviously, I think having golden hour plus that warm tone really kind of overpowered the whole thing. Compositionally, it is kind of a mess. To its credit, it did get the negative prompts of no tie and no beard. But overall, it is kind of a sloppy mess. We have sort of blob people back here. In our first image, our guy's hand here is very badly comped in. Number 2's face kind of looks like the cover of an Aphex Twin album. The eyes in number 3 are just kind of a little bit creepy, leaving us with number 4, which I don't think is that bad an image. I think it does go to show again that anytime that you're generating an AI, it's gonna take a couple of rolls to get you there. I did just notice that the buildings kind of have this weird 3D Google Earth kind of feel to them. I wonder if that's part of the data set. Taking down some of those perimeters and giving it a reroll got us this image, which, I think is pretty decent. There are a couple of other clunkers in here. I'm not a huge fan of this image. This one's just kind of okay, I guess. And this last one, yeah, it's okay. I did leave the negative prompts of tie and beard in, and clearly in images 3 and 4, it did not listen to me. But I was curious about this new suggestions feature, which sort of autofills in your prompt for you. So, taking our guy here and then continuing on, it'll give us some options like looking at a cell phone or with coffee and laptop computer. So let's try with coffee and laptop computer because I do love some coffee. So 4 new images generated, not so bad. I do think that number 3 is probably the most compositionally sound. Oh, look at that. He's wearing a monocle, apparently. I don't know, monocles are kind of coming back in style. We can maybe in-paint a twirly mustache on him as well. So just for comparison's sake, here is the same prompt in Midjourney. And no, I do not know why our business guy is as happy as he is. I did prompt a -- no on the beard and the tie. It still gave me a tie in images 1 and 2. And then I do like in image number 4, our business guy is just double fisting coffee. He is a man after my own heart. Dall-E 3 in ChatGPT gave us these images. I did finally get Dall-E 3 in ChatGPT. I'll do a full rundown of that pretty soon. Moving on, this is a female hiker at the base of a waterfall in a jungle forest, adventure and freedom concept. The adventure and freedom concept was something that I let Suggest fill in for me. And at first, like looking at these, yeah, they're not too bad until you kind of start moving in on some of the faces. Like in this one, it's just kind of a smudgy mess. Kind of actually reminds me of Sloth from the Goonies. And this one I thought initially looked okay until you kind of zoom in on the face and it's just kind of a mess. Overall, I don't feel that she looks like she's comped into the image that well. Like the feet just look a little bit off, and yeah, overall, it just very much has a look that she's another layer on this thing. But I thought this one looked pretty decent, and that kind of goes to show, I think you're looking at about a 1:4 ratio every time you're generating in Firefly. Now, I do think that you can get some pretty good results when you use the reference image feature. For example, taking the same prompt and running it in Midjourney, and then taking that Midjourney output and then bashing it into Firefly 2, we end up with these 4 sets of images, which I think are greatly improved from that initial output. Ultimately, I did end up liking this image a lot, although we do have the whole character back to camera thing that was so prevalent in the early days of AI image generation. Additionally, just to let you know, when you download an image from Firefly, apparently it will be issued credentials, these content credentials, to let people know that the image was generated in AI. I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to let you guys know that that's a thing. I do tend to think that Firefly does well with kind of like stocky images. Like, for example, this is a young couple drinking coffee in a cafe in Paris. And these are all pretty solid images. I mean, there are still some problems. Like here, we've got the wacky fingers. I'm not going to judge that too harshly. Like I said, every AI image model seems to have that problem. This was the one that I actually kind of liked the most. Our guy here kind of looks like he's wearing some guy liner. I mean, I'm not judging. Maybe he's the drummer for Imagine Dragons. Do you know what the drummer for Imagine Dragons looks like? That said, we do have these visual intensity and style strength sliders, so cranking all of those up and running the same prompt again, and running that with the preset dramatic light gives us these 4 images, which I think are pretty nice. I do really like this one with kind of a subtle lens flare to it. There's some chromatic aberration happening in the background, but I actually kind of like that. I actually very much appreciate the fact that Adobe put in a sliding scale on that stylization. That is one criticism I've had of late of Midjourney, is that a lot of times by default, it'll just get a little nuts with the stylization right out of the ballpark. For example, that same prompt in Midjourney gives us these 4 vintage looking images, which are very nice, but not exactly what I had in mind necessarily. You can, of course, issue -- style raw in Midjourney for kind of a less opinionated, less stylized look, which gave us these 4 images, which I do like a lot, but you know, it would be nice if there was kind of a slider preset that you could sort of blend the 2 together. Now, one thing I'm definitely not a fan of is that Adobe has chosen to have this sort of baffling credit system built into Firefly. You get a number of credits based on what tier of subscription service you have, and you know, they have a chart of your generative credit use, how much it costs to do each thing. But the fact that they've listed it out in this table format does indicate, to me at least, that those credits will increase at some point in the future. So even at the top tier, you basically have 1,000 generations that you can do per month. And the other annoying thing to me is that your credits don't actually roll over month to month. And apparently if you max out on all of your credits, if you're on the highest tier of the Adobe plan, you can still generate, you're just on the slow boat. Whereas if you're on Adobe Express or you're an Adobe Firefly paid user, you are then limited to 2 generations per day. Beyond that, my thoughts on Firefly 2 are, it's okay. So I do think that the bigger news that came out of Max, which I don't, for some reason, a lot of people aren't really talking about, is the fact that you can generate in Illustrator now. So this is kind of the demo thing. We have this blank spot that we can generate. So let's put a animated style Viking here. And yeah, very quickly, we now have our Viking. And what's kind of cool is that each of these paths are editable. So, you know, you can make changes if you want to. What I think is pretty cool too is the fact that you can actually recolor your Viking as well via this color library, or you can even do a generative recolor where we take it into, let's try Summer by the Sea. And then you can instantly recolor your entire character with the click of a button. That's pretty fantastic in all honesty. And again, everything in here is totally editable. So you know, you can move the mountains around or whatever you want to do, reshape, resize. Yeah, pretty wild. Moving over to, I guess, kind of more my home territory. Adobe Premiere had a kind of strange presentation So they basically showed off the new text to edit functionality that is within Premiere, and it's really cool. It is pretty exciting, except I've been doing it since April. So yeah, this has been around for a minute. And granted, there have been some improvements that have been made to the model, but at the same time, I'm just kind of, I find it a little disingenuous that everyone's like, gasp, how did they do that when, you know, we've been doing it for months now? It was just sort of surprising that they went in that direction, considering that they already have announced Adobe Firefly for video. Now, I don't know what shape Firefly for video is in right now. Obviously, it is not ready for release, but you know, you would have thought that they maybe would have done a presentation on this as opposed to something that has already been released. I actually do think that there is some really interesting stuff coming up for Firefly for video, including, you know, text effects, these analyzing the footage to find B-roll, and actually this generate storyboards thing, I actually think is going to be a really cool feature once it is implemented. And to be honest, I'm like, go deeper on this, show this. This is something that would really wow me. As a fun fact, when I was actually using the text edit feature, the thing that I would do is that after every good take, I would say farts. That way I could just run up here and run a search for the word farts. And that's when I knew that this was a good take. Now, I did stop doing the text to edit. It was a little bit on the slow side. I could just edit faster myself. And I mean, you don't know how many times I accidentally almost let one of those farts through. So Adobe Max does have another day to go. I believe this is just supposed to be for workshops though, and sort of the big bombshell announcements have already happened, but who knows, I might be back tomorrow with something completely insane. I guess in the meantime, please let me know what you guys think of Firefly 2 and just kind of the whole Adobe Goes AI thing in general. I thank you for watching. My name is Tim.